Hello everyone, welcome to Lunch and Lore. I'm Tormented by Gnomes, and joining me today as always is NinjaManMat, my lifelong friend and co-creator of the world of Anacra. Matt, how you doing this fine Friday morning?
I am here, and I'm speaking with my mouth.
Yes, same, true, that's pretty true. So, if you're not familiar with the show, Lunch and Lore is a hour-long segment where Matt and I talk about different aspects of the world of Anacra, the world of the Four Kingdoms, which is the setting of most of our games in Casters and Castles, including Quest for the Book of Dawn, and One Last Ride. Today's topic is something that appeared near the end of One Last Ride. It's a major aspect of the cosmology of the Four Kingdoms, and it is the so-called Fifth Kingdom, the Realm of Dream.
So, and I mean, technically, it appears whenever you take a long rest, but that's beside the point.
Yes, it does. But in terms of actual magical access, messing with it, etc., it's a little bit more esoteric. So yes. Let's go to our questions that we had for this. First off, where did it come from? So the Four Kingdoms of Anacra, each was deliberately created by the elemental sovereigns. The Dawn era, where all the worlds were one and thought could change reality itself. I'm getting reports that I might be getting some bad audio here. How do I sound to you?
It's the same thing that happened last time when we were on our live show, where you can still hear just fine. You don't sound robotic, but it kind of sounds like it's reverberating. Like they said, maybe it sounds like the plug isn't all the way in sometimes.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it until you went live, actually.
That is deeply unfortunate. Check.
I mean,
is that better? Is that better at all?
It's definitely better, but it's still a little bit like
no. Yeah, a little fuzz on the mic. Oh, I know what it is.
I think it just sounds like, you got hair on your chest. I'm cool with it.
How about now?
Whoa, it sounds better, but really far away. Can you turn that up a little bit?
Yeah. So what happens is VoiceMod likes to reset its settings. Now.
Wow.
Yeah, VoiceMod likes to change itself on me without checking with me first, especially after I reboot. Yes. So hopefully we're good now. The reason it was echoing chat is because I was monitoring myself and I didn't remember that would go through to you. Thank you, everyone, for checking in with us.
Dude, your voice sounds like honey now. It's like milk.
Yeah, so I spent all this money on semi-professional grade equipment. That's the least that we expect, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, the Realm of Dream. So, in the beginning, there was the Dawn, the primal state of Anacra, where energy, matter, and thought were all one, and each could shape the other. Then came the invasion of the Infernals. They almost consumed the world of Dawn, and the Sovereigns were forced to divide the world into the Four Kingdoms in order to give it structure and to raise the firmament, a barrier against the entities waiting in the hungry dark. Now, they created four kingdoms: the Underworld, the Mortal World, the Otherworld, and the Overworld. They did not create the Realm of Dreams. The Realm of Dreams arose spontaneously without their intervention. It was a surprise to them. And it took them a while to figure out roughly where it came from. I'm not sure how much of this is in-game knowledge, like that people would know on a regular basis, versus behind-the-scenes knowledge. But the Realm of Dream has two primary sources. The first source: Anacra sprang from the ashes of the world before. This is a cycle that has gone on into the absolute depths of time. Nobody knows how many worlds there have been, or if there was a first world, or if the cycle is truly eternal with no end. The cycle of birth, life, death, and renewal applies to entire worlds as well as it does every living being and creation within Anacra and beyond. So, the Dawn rose from the ashes of the world before. Very little is known about the world before. It had its own gods. And some of the dragons imprisoned behind the seven gates of the Silent City, were from the world before. They were imprisoned there for crimes against creation, the details of which are unknown to most, since nobody who was involved in locking them up is still around. But the world before, when the gods of that world, they sacrificed themselves and they sacrificed their world, because the alternative was the world being consumed by silence, which threatened to end the cycle of birth, life, death, and renewal, end time, existence, creation, etc. The constant pressure of the silence on reality to some people, it seems like this evil from outside the cycle that's trying to bring everything to an end. And that is often how it manifests. But it has its own role to play in the cycle. That outside pressure threatening to negate and obliviate everything forces, it's part of the energy that drives the cycle of birth, life, death, and renewal. And without it, there could be stagnation. So the gods of the world before channeled all their energy, all their creation, even their own essence into one last ditch attack to fend off the silence. It left behind the proto-matter that the Laughing God used to seed the world of Anacra, but they left behind something else of theirs as well. Gods are not omnipotent, but they are mega-nipotent, I guess. Megapotent. And they are not omniscient, but they have a higher sentience and a higher form of knowledge and vision than mortals do. And so the realm of dream was this unexpected remnant of their knowledge and their perception, their omniscience with a lowercase o, if you will. It's not a physical element that the gods of creation accounted for in their divining of the world into the four kingdoms. So when they divided out all the matter and energy, this thought was left behind, this perception, this knowledge, this sentience. It's not a single entity, so it's not like actual, thinking beings, but it's more like mental energy just sort of floating around out there. And so when they put everything else in its place, that was sort of separated and set free. And so the fifth kingdom of dream exists as this wild, not part of the grand design of the cosmos, free-floating, almost spaceless mental scape. And when the four kingdoms were divided, now you've got mortal entities, and mortal creatures have to sleep. A lot of them have to sleep. And when they do, their minds drift into that mindscape to be replenished, to be renewed, and to be sort of cleansed and freed and able to process everything, so on and so forth. So dream is a combination of the background radiation of the mental energy of the gods of the world before and the mental energy of all sentient beings that sleep in the mortal world. Did I miss anything, Matt?
I think you're right on track. As you all can tell, this is kind of Joe's baby. The realm of dream has been a thing that throughout many of his created works, or even our campaign worlds, it's always been a very special place in his art. And we've put a lot into trying to make sure that it works. And I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. There's always going to be things that we need to nip and tuck here and there, but honestly, I think it fits in really well.
Mm-hmm. So where is it in the cosmos? The thing about the realm of dream is that if you imagine the four kingdoms of Anacra, you can imagine these interlocking spheres and layers that form sort of a 3D model, with the underworld at its core, receiving, processing, and redistributing energy and matter. And then the mortal world around it, sort of laced in parallel, these two interlacing meshes that form a sphere, which are the mortal world and the other world locked together. And then the overworld, the Sky Kingdom, wraps around that, and all together they form the firmament. And there's sort of layers contained in between them, like there's space for the moon, and the stars are wrapped around the edges, and you got some weird border dimensions that represent the places where they touch. There's some
Crossing
other,
points and little gaps here and there. Any leftover pockets from the Dawn realm, all things like that.
Mm-hmm. But it all sort of has a physical place inside the sphere, inside the four kingdoms. Excuse me. The realm of dream, however, exists almost on its own model, because it's this electrical field that suffuses the whole thing, and it exists wherever sentient dreaming life exists. Now, this makes it so that the realm of dream doesn't follow a lot of the rules of Anacra, because again, if you are able to dream walk mentally, you could be in one kingdom and experience the dreams of a creature in another kingdom, because dream connects all sleeping minds. But it also makes it very difficult to learn magic that affects dream, because in dream, things don't, they usually follow sort of dream logic. We're all familiar with the, oh, I open this door, and even though this is my house, in my dream, my house has another door that leads into the sequoia forest, which doesn't exist normally, but in dream logic, it makes perfect sense. So
Yeah.
when you use magic to interact with dream, it's not wild magic where it can, blow up the moon or whatever, but it definitely gets warped and gets twisted and follows this uh, illogical logic of its own. Well, what is it like to be in the dream world? For the most part, it's like experiencing a dream. The best example of this that I can think of is an episode, it was like episode 5 or 6, I want to say, of One Last Ride, where the party made tea from the Mordain flower that they found inside Tiberius Wanderstave's cipher. And by inhaling that, they were able to project their minds into the dreamscape. Normally, when you dream in the real world, you are asleep and you've got all these images that cross your mind. And it's possible to learn lucid dreaming, where you're able to remember your dreams or even affect your dreams. But sometimes trying to change your dream can be like trying to hold on to jello, where you can kind of affect it, but also it's slipping through your fingers. So anybody who remembers any sort of dream will know what it's like to go there, at least somewhat. But the experience of just naturally going there by falling asleep is different from the experience of artificially inducing a sleep state. The most common ways to do this in Anacra are through the Mordain tea, which is very rare and highly poisonous. So it's not common. It only grows in certain swamps. Like, you can't just, I feel like y'all want to smoke some tea and go to the dream world. It's not that easy. The other most common way is there's a 5th level spell called Dream, and that is the most well-known example of oniromancy, dream magic. It's because it's on a lot of classes' spell lists, it's not that difficult to get access to this magic. It allows you to appear as a messenger in someone else's dream. While you do this, essentially you go into a trance until they fall asleep. Then you enter their dreamscape, and whatever they happen to be dreaming about at the time, you see it, at least in some regard, and you're able to deliver a message to them. You can also, if you want, use that spell to turn their dream into a nightmare to torment them, inflicting psychic damage and preventing them from gaining the effects of a long rest. So this form of oniromancy isn't uncommon in Anacra, but dedicated specialist oniromancers are significantly more rare. Now, Matt, I think that in the past I've made oniromancy this super secret rare form of magic, but if you look at the real world examples, a lot of magical and spiritual traditions involve dreams in a lot of ways. So I don't think it would
Oh,
be
yeah.
as rare as I've made it in past campaigns and stories and such.
I mean, I think especially because the way that you kind of conceptualized it was there was this original character, Do Not Steal, that Joe came up with a long time ago, and that was kind of your shtick, and no one else really understood what you were doing with it, except over time as it became more and more popular. It kind of ended up becoming this very rare and esoteric thing. But like you've suggested, in the actual game that this world is based around, I mean, there's aside from Dream, there's a lot of spells. There's the 1st level sleep spell. There's the 3rd level spell Catnap. There's a lot of spells that can either help help people along to dreamland or can affect people in their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, just like everything else in this game that we all enjoy so much, there's probably a lot of spells out there that, while not included in the original text, likely exist within Anacra, where people like oniromancers have come up with ways to affect people's dreams. Not necessarily like the dream spell to send a message or try and basically kill someone while they're sleeping, but other such ways where you'd be able to travel and learn. I'm assuming, at least the way that I've always experienced the way we used it, Dream always felt like this weird mix between the ethereal realm and like the Feywild, where it's this weird place. It looks almost kind of foggy and if you're a lucid dreamer or a neuromancer, you have a lot more power there. And it's not like you just go walking around like, oh, yes, this is my house. But in dream, like you said, things are a little bit weird, a little bit different, doesn't always make sense. And dream is kind of how you make it. You either go along for the ride or you can kind of shape it to be how you want. But regardless, it always feels a little bit foggy, a little bit weird. And like you said, there's that chance, much like with many of the Feywild places, when you leave, you might forget everything that you experienced while you were there. So I always thought it was this weird kind of mix of the two, is the way I always kind of envisioned it.
In First off, that's a good way of putting it. Second, in D&D 5th edition, in the standard cosmology, the astral plane does the job of the dream world. The dream world,
You're correct, yeah.
most of the inspiration for the dream world for me came from the back of the 3rd edition manual of the planes. That's sort of, I took that model and I've built off of that. When we talk about the astral in Anacra, it's been a little bit undecided. Like in some ways, if you leave Anacra, the Hungry Dark is just the astral plane. That's one way of putting it. And there might be little astral pockets here and there, but in terms of mental being a mindscape, I think dream is the primary mindscape. I think that if we have psionics in Anacra, which is not a topic on our list right now, and it's always its own weird thing, I don't think all psionics are dream magic, but I do think there's a very close link because dream is the mindscape in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Like, oh yeah.
It is the mental realm. So psychic attacks, psychic damage, a lot of that, the line between that and oneiromancy is at the very least extremely blurry.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like saying like, oh yeah, fire damage happens in the plane of fire. And that's exactly like I think where it comes from. Kind of like you were saying, I don't think that every psychic is an oneiromancer, but I almost feel like every oneiromancer is a psychic. You know what I mean?
Yes, or at least deals with psychic magic and psychic energy.
Yes.
Like what type of energy is dream energy? It's psychic energy, psionic power, mental power.
Kind of going way, way many months back when we first did this, when we did our lunch and lore on magic, where we had talked about, just because, for instance, even if you're like an evocation wizard, that doesn't mean that you can only cast evocation spells. That's just your specialty. And the more time you spend with one certain kind of magic, and you kind of, whether it's a class feature or not, if you're using that, you can use any kind of magic that's out there. It's just if you specialize in a certain type, it tends to change you, and I would say the more you lean on it, it kind of becomes your crutch, but also your strength,
Yeah. It transforms you and you resemble it more and more. So
I feel like, unless you had a different point, I feel like you were kind of leaning here, kind of comparing the realm of dream to the astral sea. We know that normally in D&D cosmology, there are many sorts of creatures, great leviathans and terrifying entities that roam the astral sea. In Anacra's lore, what kind of, if any, creatures would you find roaming around the realm of dream?
Okay, so in Anacra, entities native to the realm of dream are incredibly alien. The closest thing I can come to, it's not quite like Eberron, where the realm of dream is where aberrations and Cthulhuids come from. But the creatures native to dream are psychic entities. They're extremely alien. They're extremely scary. They don't fit neatly into like, oh, well, these are creatures of the one flesh, and these are, fiends and infernals. Like, creatures native to dream are just out there. They're all over the place. I am going to talk about Khotan in a moment, by the way, because Khotan has become a denizen of dream, but didn't start out there. So let's talk a little bit about the sort of topography of dream, and then we can talk about the creatures that dwell there. For the most part, dream consists entirely of individual dreams. This creature's dream, this creature's dream, this creature's dream. So when you send your mind there, which is the most common way to travel, you sort of enter your own mindscape, and you might conjure up a mental journey in order to travel, and your brain says, oh, a journey, and it's gonna, whatever a journey means to you, it's gonna assemble that, and that'll be the metaphor of how you travel. Everything in dream is highly metaphorical. But most of what else is out there are other creatures' dreams. So you might end up sort of appearing, if you're a dream walker, in all these different creatures' dreams. Because it's a mental projection of yourself, an accomplished dreamwalker can take on whatever form or guise they want. But for the most part, you're just experiencing, oh, now either my mindscape is extending in this direction and I'm populating it with whatever my metaphor for a journey or travel or dangerous adventure is, or I'm skipping from island to island all these different dreamers and their thoughts. There is sort of a raw mental landscape, like you might hear people talk about the deep ethereal, where normally the ethereal plane is you're in the border ethereal, so you see whatever world you're bordering as this foggy shadow, but it's implied that you can move away from that border deeper into the, like, away from the shore into the depths, where it's just pure fog and nobody really understands what's there. In Dream, there's something called the dream heart, which is sort of this nexus of lost or ambient mental power. It is extremely dangerous. For the most part, only very experienced dreamwalkers will go there. And it serves a similar function as far as people understand. They don't understand it perfectly, but it seems to serve a similar function as the underworld serves for matter and energy, where lost thoughts and bolts of inspiration and such emit from it and are drawn to it, but there might be something else there nobody truly understands. If you were able to look at Dream without being in it, you would see all these pockets of different dreamers' minds, and then in between you would just see sparkling, scintillating blue light, which is at least that's what I would see, because that's what always comes to mind when psychic energy, dream energy specifically, is used in the mortal world in its pure form. It takes on this, it almost looks like if you've ever seen an aquarium where light is pouring through the water and it makes these ripples on like the far side of the wall. You know, the glass is here, there's a wall here and light is shining through and you've got all these ripples. That's what oneiromantic energy looks like. So there is technically non-dream space inside of Dream where nobody's mind is present. It's just ambient mental energy. But as soon as you go there, you bring your mind with you, and so it automatically shapes itself to extend your dreamscape, or your dreamscape becomes this bubble floating around in it. So that's the topography. So what lives there?
And real quick, it really kind of feels like you were saying earlier, the really Dream has kind of in a way taken this weird hybrid for Anacra with the Astral Sea.
Yes.
And again, the Astral Sea, they really, it's gone through many iterations over the different editions of D&D, and it's only loosely talked about in 5th edition. A lot of the stuff that people work with in 5th edition, it's mentioned the astral plane, but it's mostly a carryover from previous editions, and they don't really go into a huge amount of detail, but it really feels like, you know, when you go to the Astral Sea and you have that cord, that silver cord that's attached to you, and your mind is there but your body isn't, astral projection and all that. It seems like we're having the realm of dreams, since really in our version of Anacra, all the astral plane would technically would be the hungry dark. If you go, especially if you go past the borders of the firmament, it's just nothingness out there. So really, there is, I guess, technically the Astral Sea where it's just space. But if you're playing with astral stuff in Anacra, you're probably mostly playing with Dream. And it really, in that sense of using the term Astral Sea, it seems like what you're describing, mate, kind of like with the different islands and stuff. You almost have this big old sea of like dreamlike scintillating fog, like you were describing. And then there's these little pockets or islands that have each different person's kind of subconscious mind and then their actual thinking mind. And almost like you said, with it being islands, you could have a powerful Oneiromancer not just go into their own dream, but like you said, they can spread across many. Have you thought about the possibility of an Oneiromancer being able to merge dreams? For instance, if they took one person's dreamscape, their island, and were able to either fuse or pull another island into their own. Have we discussed like that happening? Okay, yeah.
I've never discussed it, but a powerful enough Oneiromancer would absolutely be able to do that. Another way to think about this, in the Dawn world, you were able to use your creativity and your pure thought to shape reality. Dream is like that, except it's not physically real. It remains a purely mental landscape. I want to talk about Oneiromancy in a bit. Let's go back to our topic about what dwells there. The main entity you will encounter in the Fifth Kingdom are people having dreams, sleepers, dreamers of all sorts. And usually they're not going to drift and bump into each other. Every mindscape sort of has this bubble around it that you can pierce if you're a trained dream walker, but otherwise you're just going to be, it's just your mind. What else can happen? It is possible for somebody to become stranded there. The most powerful example we've seen of that was Khotan. Tiberius Wanderstave learned a spell. I think he learned this spell from a Shardalon.
Oh.
I think this because the reason he went to the Silent City in the first place, he knew about a Chardalon. He'd been there before. He learned forbidden ancient magic from a Chardalon. He learned a spell that severed somebody's astral body from their material form. When he activated this on Khotan, Khotan died of sleep deprivation. He basically took away Khotan's ability to sleep and then imprisoned Khotan's dream self, astral self, in a dreamscape of his own devising, which then Bendis Rambletoon eventually unleashed upon the world. It's a very rare thing. There are other circumstances where this could happen, but they're rare. If somebody dies in their sleep, most of the time they're just going to go ahead and pass on, but extenuating circumstances could cause them to be stranded, basically be a ghost, but instead of haunting the physical world, they haunt the mental world. That is a possibility. It is,
and we know that in actual D&D cosmology, incorporeal spirits like ghosts and the like, they do live in the ethereal realm. So having it be this, like we've talked about, the dream is kind of this weird cross between having aspects of the ethereal, mainly being like the astral. So it would kind of make sense that in weird circumstances you could have these ghosts that kind of blend between the two.
Right. Like, for the most part, the ethereal in our world is just the weird in-betweenness between two physical worlds, but you could extend that to dream as well. It's
the packing peanuts or the cushion paper between worlds.
Exactly. What else would you encounter in dream? I think that...
Likewise, I wanted to ask you, so in regards, like you said, you mentioned that a lot of the creatures or things you would encounter if you go to dream are going to be really either subconscious or actual dream walkers that are there. But are there any, like, for instance, if someone's having a nightmare and they're going to be conjuring up, let's just say, fiends in their sleep, and these are going to be like dream fiends. They're not real fiends. They're just dream-like entities that are taking on the characteristics of the fiend. Is it possible, like you said, even though these creatures are contained within the different islands or bubbles of a creature's subconscious, are those entities able to break out and then carry themselves even past the dream and continue wandering the land? Are you going to have anything in the realm of dream that doesn't necessarily come from someone's psyche, or is everything there basically homegrown from dreams?
There is other
at least
stuff.
From what you think.
No, actually, okay. I was about to bring up what you were talking about. It is possible for someone's nightmares to get out of their own head, but it takes extenuating circumstances. Under normal circumstances, that will never happen. A latent psychic might do this. Somebody who has who's going to be like a dream sorcerer, somebody just born with mental powers, their dreams might get out of their own head and wreak havoc. You're saying we should start making oneiromantic subclasses? I'll get on that. Oh yeah, 100%. That's something that I've been interested in for a while. But dreamers under extenuating circumstances, their dreams could escape from their own heads. There are certain creatures that can haunt like night hags can haunt your dreams. So you might encounter a night hag that is a physical entity dream walking. So you've got dreams run rampant, but again, it has to be somebody with special powers or somebody under a curse. Like, that doesn't happen naturally. It always happens under weird circumstances. A powerful evil dream walker could release somebody else's nightmares. They could grab that nightmare, bolster them up with some more mental energy to make them self-sustaining and cut them loose. Or they could trap you in your nightmares and then use your dreamscape as an incubator to send out all these creatures. That being said, those creatures would probably still be tethered to that original dreamer. So if you could awaken that person, they might all poof, something like that. The rules are very, very vague in Dream. So you've got...
Purposely, yeah,
deliberately. You've got, let's say, there's not much chance of an Inception type event happening. You could absolutely do Inception. You could very much do Inception. You would need to be a very well-trained dreamwalker, but if you have that power and that knowledge, you could enter somebody else's dreamscape, take on whatever guise or disguise you wanted, and manipulate what's going on in their dream. Dreams are highly suggestible. So, and the more willpower you have, and the more ability to sort of assume control of that, the more you can do. A dreamwalker could show up in your dream and introduce a small little concept, right? Like safety. Or they could introduce the fear of something being stolen to get you to go check on that thing. And when you go to check on that thing, your mind will recreate where that thing is. And they might be able to say, aha, now I know the combination to your safe because I made you dream about it. So Inception is very, very doable, but talented dreamwalkers like that are not common.
I mean, and even technically, anybody who has access to the in D&D, the fifth level spell Dream, can absolutely, incept somebody. I mean, this spell is perfectly made for being able to go in there. It's not only do you deliver a message or cause nightmares, you can literally during the 8 hours that you have for the spell and during their entire process of dreaming, which shouldn't last more than hopefully 8 hours, you can modify the landscape, objects, images. You can literally change anything about that dream that you want. And you can make it as subtle or as imposing as possible. So I don't know how much you'd be able to keep going through realms and realms and realms of dream. That I'm sure it's possible that gets a little bit, DM fiat territory where, hey, can I be in dream and cast dream on this person and make them think that they're not in a dream? I mean, absolutely. I'm sure as long as you have someone on board, you can make that happen. But it's absolutely perfectly set up for that.
So we've got dreamers, dream walkers, and a dream walker is anybody who has the ability to leave their own dream while in the mental landscape. And that includes, again, night hags, monsters, various fiends, fae, other creatures that are capable of messing with the mental landscape. You've got dream constructs, which are, mental things that have been dreamed up and then ran loose. And then there's the scary stuff. There are things out there that are not nightmares. They're nobody's dream. They are entities native to the realm of dream. They are the unknown. They are the thing that keep dream wardens up at night. Psychic parasites, dream eaters, nightmare spawners, just weird esoteric aliens that will just watch you without you ever actually knowing what they're up to. Nobody knows where they come from. Nobody knows if they have like a home of their own, if they're denizens of dream, or if they're from some other dimension or other world and just they're other dreamwalkers themselves. That's the really, really scary stuff. And if you get the attention of one of those, you're going to have a bad time.
Is that kind of like how we were talking about? This was a number of episodes ago where you had mentioned, and it was a creature that I had seen a long, long, long time ago. I think it was called a spell weaver. We were talking about them being the groundwork that we were using for the scribes. Are you talking about those kind of creatures? Like they would find their way there, and that's where they would linger if you were going to be using them in an Anacra game? Or are you thinking even something more, not even sinister, but like you said, and I wouldn't even go with. I mean, yeah, alien. I feel like in D&D, anything that has even the notion of sci-fi is always classified as an alien, and it totally makes sense. But just something, I feel like aberrations are like, because there's different classifications of alien. You have like science alien, you have just eldritch or wrong alien, and then I feel like you have almost like miscellaneous alien, where like we don't really have a type for this. This is definitely not of this world. It's not so disturbing that we can't conceive it. Almost like a person that is like a spider person made of goop, and you're like, what even is that? And it just horrifies you looking at it. But it's not like literally a beep boop, I make robots and I'm a green skinned big headed alien.
Well, a lot of the times when I use the word alien in the context of Anacra, I don't mean extraterrestrials. I mean like when somebody feels alienated from something, they feel detached, they feel like a stranger. Again, the word alien originally means stranger. And so alien in this context just means removed from our normal understanding, incredibly different, a totally different scheme of understanding reality. And that's what I mean. Not like, again, destroy aliens.
No. I was just clarifying that we have basically different subtypes of alien. Like when you describe alien, we have a smorgasbord of these are the various different things it can be. Right. And I feel like in the realm of dream, it's almost kind of like miscellaneous, like alien, like something that we haven't really talked about up until now.
Yeah, if creatures of the one flesh are blood-sucking, tentacle-beaked, xenomorphs, these are psychic. A lot of them are psychic entities. A lot of them have non-traditional geometry. There might be physical beings that exist in the dream world that could not physically exist in our world. Psychic, again, I mentioned dream parasites before. All sorts of nasty stuff. Yeah.
There are these, go ahead.
Lovecraftian, but not just in terms of like, oh, that's a bigger thing than I'm able to understand, but like this thing has 6 dimensions. And when we look at it, it doesn't really make sense to us.
Do you remember in the Dark Crystal, There's the Uru. They were the entity that was around before the Skeksis and the I can't remember their name, the lizard people, the masters. Anyways, I almost feel like we're looking at that kind of an entity where it's this very doesn't even have a mouth, just speaks psychically, is basically just learning and devising and figuring out the reason for things and not necessarily trying to hurt or conquer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but this takes the problem of being chaotic buttons to a whole new scale, right? Like
Yeah.
when we talk about Fae being chaotic buttons, it's there might be a fairy whose whole moral framework is I like buttons and I want to collect them, and I see that as honorable. And I see stopping me from stealing your buttons as not just like I want it and I feel bad about that, but like you are dishonorable, because their whole moral framework centers on something that we would find completely irrational. Entities native to Dream are even further beyond that. Like, they may not be able to communicate with us in a meaningful way at all. It may just like this weird thing shows up in your dream and you smell burnt onions and it says 3 words to you, and those words in that order don't mean anything to you because you just got some small fragment of the communication it was attempting. If it was even trying to communicate with you, it could have just been leaking thoughts because its thoughts are on this 7th dimensional triad conveying concepts that don't even exist in our reality. You just brushed against this completely, again, I use the word alien as in unknowably strange thing.
Yeah, the more we talk about this, the more I feel like really the realm of Dream is kind of taking the place of the astral sea in a huge way, or at least it kind of is bordering. It's almost like how you talked about we have the border ethereal and then the deep ethereal. It almost feels like the realm of Dream is kind of like the border Hungry Dark, the border astral, you know?
Yeah, in its own way, except that a lot of the things you might meet in the Hungry Dark are, you might meet Githyanki pirates, which are completely, like, we can comprehend that. There's a lot of things in the Hungry Dark we are actually capable of comprehending, but Dream as a purely mental landscape is beyond that. Fortunately, encounters with this sort of entity are extremely rare. This is not a common thing that happens. So it's not something that you have to worry about on average. But again, if your character is a dream warden, these are, like, aside from just stopping people from getting attacked by nightmares and stuff, I think some of the most common dream entities are just these parasites that create nightmares and then feed off of emotion. And they're the sort of thing that if you were a powerful Oniromancer, you take them seriously, but you know how to fight them. You know how to go in and get rid of them. But you may never truly understand them.
Earlier, Tim had asked, are false awakenings something special? I.e., if you are dreaming and you wake up in the morning and get ready for work, but you're dreaming that. Where people kind of like, I guess we like you like live out your morning, or you live out the beginning of your day in a dream, only to realize when you wake up that you were dreaming it.
Off the top of my head, no, not as a general rule. Like, dreams can be prophetic, though not in the predicting the future theme. It's usually in the, like, picking up an emanation or vibration of something else out there. But most dreams are just generated by your mind. Like, your mind is sort of just oozing and relaxing and populating this bubble of mental energy with whatever is on its mind. So normally if you have a false awakening where you dream about going through your routine, it's just that, you know, your morning routine is heavily on your mind, and that's what's coming from there. I think different cultures are going to have different significances to certain types of dreams, and they'll be able to analyze it, and a trained dream sage will be able to do so. But for something like that, there isn't a universal truth.
Now, question, we talked about how there are denizens, creatures that are native or at least roam in the realm of Dream, much like in the other kingdoms that were formed, because the Dream, we're saying, is the secretive, like, 5th kingdom asterisk of our 4-kingdom setup. In regards to that, I'm assuming that even though it's a very different place, it likely, from what we're saying, it has creatures that do inhabit it. I'm assuming there has to be, at least not the way that we might consider it, but there should be a flora and fauna of some kind, right? There would be things that you could find, whether they are I guess you could say, incredibly dangerous creatures. Like, I'm not thinking like space deer or dream deer necessarily, but there should be its own, I would assume, kind of ecosystem, right? The things that dwell outside of the bubbles or the spheres. Like, it's not like this place, like you were saying, this place was not crafted. This place was discovered. It was one of those things that when the when the Dawn Realm ceased to be, we talked about this, when the Dawn Realm kind of ceased to be, there were no mortal creatures originally in Anacra. That wasn't really a concept that was even considered. But once things were set in stone and things had to choose between keeping that sense of their divinity, aside from the sovereigns were mostly immune to it, as were their children. But you either had to choose a form, in which case you became immortal and stayed in the mortal realm, or if you did not stay in the mortal realm and you wanted to hang on to that modicum of malleability and power, you likely dwelt in one of the other realms, so where you could keep that sense of self that you had been used to in the original Dawn world. And the Fifth Kingdom of Dream was kind of a byproduct of that, when you ended up creating these mortal forms and took that shape, kind of like how we were describing omniscience and omnipotence. We kind of, and I don't know how much this we're keeping, but we had talked about how that the omnipotence, the power of the gods, kind of took that form, took the shape of these husks, these people, these mortals that dwelt within the mortal realm. And then that consciousness that was left over that had to be basically given shape became the dreamscape, became the realm of dream. And that's, I know we originally were discussing that. I'm not sure how much of that we've actually kept, but it seems like this was not an intended thing. This was kind of a byproduct. And much like the other realms, that yes, there were things that were put on and were very obvious. I'm assuming a lot that's happened here was not within the plan or the scope of what the sovereigns, or even what ended up happening when the Emerald Tablets were created during the formation of the worlds. This just kind of happened, and I'm assuming a lot has just kind of bubbled up in the muck that is Dreamscape.
So, with regards to ambient life, Dream is the most, I'm going to use the word alien again, it's the most alien of our worlds. The other ones have like a topography and ecosystems and such. Dream doesn't really have that. Dream resembles a lot more the like the energy planes, right? It's this just, it's not really locked into a physical reality of any kind whatsoever. So I think that instead of having dream creatures like stat blocks and stuff, flora, fauna, things that live there that just form an ecosystem, that's not really a thing. Instead, what you get are ambient thoughts and ambient ideas. The vast majority of dream is just whatever people are dreaming about. And independent entities moving around in that are not dreamers themselves are very rare. But there are a lot of leftover ideas. An idea might get out of somebody's head and then float around in dream. Or it might be left over, some ancient idea of the gods of the world before who are now dead. All that remains of them are these little bits and pieces of emotion and thought and idea and such. So the flora and fauna of the Fifth Kingdom largely consists of mental concepts that will float around. And that's part of when you have a dream about something that you don't really ever think about. In Anacra, it's possible that your dreamscape just sort of one of these little, brain krill just boop into your dreamscape, and now it randomly came to you out of nowhere. Inspiration, not the in-game mechanic, but like the out-of-game, I went to sleep and I thought about it. Some of that is your brain reorganizing and just doing inner work, but some of it is your brain picking up other people's thoughts. And they're usually, when somebody's thought gets out of their dreamscape, it's not like, I just got this full formed idea. It's more like a little nudge, a little spark of mental inspiration. The full thing doesn't really come through in most cases. But because dream, it doesn't like the entities native to it are either rare or imperceptible to humanity for the most part.
You had talked about there was like dream parasites.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking, I'm not sure how much, I know that you yourself, being the awesome nerd that you are, you're mostly in regards to like fantasy and maybe not
Mm-hmm.
quite as much with comic books, but are you familiar with one of Superman's villains, Mongol, in the DC universe?
No.
He had this plant that he cultivated. He was the basically the leader of Warworld. I won't get into that's going to be a whole different thing, but he had this plant that he cultivated called the Black Mercy. It was a entity that it would basically grapple you, and once it had placed itself on your chest, it would force you into a little basically dream of your own. You would be stuck in dream as long as this plant was stuck on you, and it would give you this very idealized and wonderful version of anything that you wouldn't pick it, but it would go through your memories and it would select a basically perfect world for you. And you would be stuck there and it would basically feed off you for the rest of your life while you were
Mm-hmm.
trapped in this perfect version of what you would consider your life would be. And I kind of, in a way, almost think that the very similar thing probably inhabits the realm of dream. Again, not saying that we're porting the Black Mercy, like
Hmm.
through and through, but I would have to imagine there are similar things that these parasites feed off of your dreams.
Hmm.
And much like most other parasites, they either just take until you die, or they would give you something in return in order to kind of make it not a fair trade necessarily, but make
Hmm.
sure either that you don't want to get rid of it because you're getting something in return, or that you don't really notice, much like those weird parasites that will eat the tongue off of a fish and then become its tongue and replacement, something like that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree. I think a lot of dream entities are, again, imperceptible to humanity, and they might feed off of ideas like if you forget something, it's like, well, that thing ate it. But it's not gnawing on you. It's not like a leech where it attaches to you for as long as it can or replaces your tongue. It's just sort of like grabbing ambient energy off of your brain. But dream parasites would work in a very similar fashion. They would induce certain ideas or emotional states into your dream and then feed off of that energy. And the degree to which they feed off of you would vary. Most of the time, it's going to be a passing encounter. You might have a rough night's sleep that's caused by a dream parasite, but then it moves on to its next target. The really scary ones that keep people, that make people worried are the ones that will just latch onto you and prevent you from waking up or haunt your dreams for night after night after night. Again, most of the time when that happens, it's a physical, mortal, or immortal creature. It's not a dream denizen. It's some sort of like a fiend or a fae or somebody who has the ability to do that, like a night hag, rather than being a creature that dwells in dream. That's rare. I feel like most people have encountered dream entities before, but they don't know it because it was just a weird thought that occurred to them, or again, they had
Nightmare.
that nightmare, or they had like just a rough night's sleep, and it's because something fed off a little bit of their mental energy and then swam along to do the next thing. But the way you're describing that creature, if we were to plant the Black Mercy plant, if we were to like just take it in Anacra, it would be a physical plant with oneiromantic properties, which again is a lot more common than purely oneiromantic entities. But yes, the long and the short of it is, I agree. If you, go
Tim
ahead.
I was going to say, Tim had a really good question I wanted us
Mhm.
to address in a moment. But before we did, you kind of hit the nail on the head. We have a lot of creatures in Anacra that likely, we have a lot of creatures in Anacra that come from literally everywhere, whether it's the Sky Kingdom, the Underworld, one of the many pools of elemental energy. So having a plant or any other creature with connections to Realm of Dream isn't a far-fetched idea. Are there any creatures aside from, like, we did mention night hag, so we kind of already established that is the case, but would there be many, if any, creatures from the dreamscape that could then escape into reality?
That could escape into reality. So
Like they could go both, because I'm assuming when a night hag goes into the Realm of Dream, their physical body is not going there, correct?
I think they turn ethereal. I think their body
Yeah.
becomes ethereal. So like they hover over you in the ethereal plane and they use that as like a bridge so they don't have to navigate through dream to find you. They find your physical body, navigate to the ethereal plane, and from the ethereal plane they're closer to the realm of dream, and so they're mental, like they're able to go there.
Like we said,
Uh,
these overlapping things, whether it be the
mhm,
astral or border ethereal or the realm of dream, they all
mhm.
kind of fit in that very in between space. So if you're bordering one, much like if you're in the ethereal and you could be bordering many other planes, you're also bordering dream.
Yeah. And if you're going to use dream magic, it's a lot easier to like read someone's dreams or enter their dreams if you have physical access because they are still tethered to their body. So like if you are going to do a ritual to read someone's dreams and you're standing next to them, that's a lot easier than being wherever you are and trying to find them in dream, right? It's difficult to find
Oh, absolutely.
a specific stranger's mind by you just go into your dreamscape and then you try to find them. Dream geography makes no sense. And so you usually need an anchor of some kind.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
let's take a question from chat. Could someone in Anacra learn to lucid dream and then actually somehow be able to recreate their lucid dreaming abilities in the real world, if only in a limited sense? So let's talk about this real quick. First off, it is possible to draw energy from the dream world into other worlds. It is possible to use the dream world as a source of power. But that doesn't allow you. Lucid dreaming allows you to shape reality. Well, to shape non-reality, right? It allows you to shape the mindscape around you. That's one of the most powerful benefits of lucid dreaming. You can't do this in the mortal world, but in the dawn world, that's essentially what reality was. All reality and dream was mixed. So when you would lucid dream, it would shape reality around you. So someone who is a lucid dreamer who got access to a pocket of dawn energy or powerful dawn magic would be really, really good at it. But when you channel energy from the dream world into the mortal world, it's in its natural form, it is psychic energy. So if you draw energy from the mortal world, from the dream world, now you've got a bunch of psychic energy, and you can generate psychic effects, the sleep spell, psychic attacks, that sort of stuff. Mind control, dominate person. You could draw on dream in order to power those spells. In order to do other effects, you would need the ability to convert energy of one type into another. So you'd need some way to like channel mental energy and convert it into fire energy and stuff like that. But lucid dreaming, you wouldn't be able to go full Neo because the physical world is physical and it is real. But there would be good synergy between dream magic and dawn magic. Matt, anything from you before we take another question? That was your question in chat.
I was just addressing, I liked what some guy had brought up, so I was addressing that a little bit.
Yes.
But no, I completely agree. It's like you were saying, just to kind of touch on it a bit, while obviously in the Matrix, Neo is Neo, and when he leaves the Matrix, eventually he gets the semblance of power. But for the most part, I feel like if you went into Dream and were a Dream Walker and were training there, there's a modicum of that power that you'd be able to bring to the mortal world. But it's most like we described, because you have this intense connection to psychic energy, you likely have a very powerful connection to psychic magic. And because you'd been training with that in the realm of Dream, you're not going to be able to bring what you can do to manipulate the dreamscape into the mortal realm. Because again, that's the whole point of the mortal realm, is that it is set. You have to literally basically change or destroy what's there. You can't really just instantly create. You have to draw that creation from somewhere else. Whereas Dream is basically pure creation. All it is just changing and making. And yeah, you destroy it, but like we talked about, you don't really destroy things in Dream. They just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I would say psychic powers increase. You probably can cast more powerful psionic abilities and spells, but no, I don't. I agree with you. I don't think you could bring the full weight of your prowess in Dream to bear in the mortal realm.
But not without dawn magic, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything's possible with door magic. You know, it's funny how much, I know it was just a joke because we initially couldn't hear what Bren was saying when he kept saying dawn magic. But it really, in a sense, dawn magic really is door magic, if you really think about it. All we have in Anacra are we have these crossing points and doors that say, nope, this is a new area, this is a new area, this is a new area. And dawn magic just goes, hey, what if it wasn't? What if that wasn't a new area? What if that door was open and I could just take what I wanted from there, just to do whatever I wanted?
Going back to a previous point, most denizens of Dream do not have physical bodies. It is technically possible to physically enter the world of Dream, but that's probably some of the rarest magic out there. And I think
it would be incredibly dangerous.
Oh yeah, hugely dangerous. Like if you die in a dream, you usually just wake up with trauma. But if you physically enter a world where somebody can turn the air into lava with a thought and your body is there, then as far as your body is concerned, that's real. So it's incredibly rare. It doesn't usually happen.
Now, the only thing is, I think would be the only boon for that is that if your body is there, it's not of Dream, so they couldn't really do anything to you.
Right.
Now,
they
again,
couldn't change you. Like if two minds are in the same place, one could be like, I'm going to force you to think of yourself as a literal chicken. But you can't do that to someone's physical body.
But you could turn a mountain into lava and drop it on somebody. Now they're being dropped by psychic lava, and now it's,
right.
You dead.
What people understand as denizens of Dream, it's only what we encounter. So people aren't totally sure. Like when you meet a dream spawn creature, it's usually in psychic form, but it's difficult to tell if it is actually just purely a mental creature that exists of its own accord in the dream world, or if it's a dream walker that has changed its self-projection to this alien form, or if it's an alien dream walker from another world entirely. Like when you meet these things, it's usually really, really hard to tell what they are. An incredibly skilled dream sage would be able to look at a creature and tell if it's connected to a physical body anywhere else in the world, even if that creature, or in the worlds, even if that creature is incredibly different. But it's mostly impossible for dream entities to enter the physical world except by inhabiting again, if they took over, like Matt said in the chat, if they took over your body, if they, took over your brain, then they would be able to use you as a body in the mortal world. But otherwise, they usually can't cross over. They can only affect the mindscape.
Mate, we're down to our last few minutes here, and there was two things I wanted to cover, but not cut you off earlier.
Mm-hmm.
One of them we can address now, and one of them I think we have enough time to touch on. The first of which is that, much like with the rest of our kingdoms in Anacra, it's my assumption, I want to confirm with you, the firmament protects the realm of dream, much like it protects the rest of Anacra. And though it has been breached, it is still there are openings where things can come through, but for the most part, it is still protected from outside instances, right? And incursions.
I don't know. I think that yes, but because the Fifth Kingdom was never part of the plan, it is the most permeable of the kingdoms. That's not the worst deal because it's hard to stage a full-scale invasion of the world through the mental landscape. Like, you can't physically enter for the most part. But because it was never part of the original plan, Dream is not part of the element of the Emerald Tablets. So I think it is actually possible to enter Anacra's dreamscape from outside, more so than it is anywhere else in the Four Kingdoms. I think it's difficult. I think that there is still this sense of deep isolation, right? You're not just going to be like, doo-doo-doo, dream walking in the Forgotten Realms. Oopsie, just happened to cross over to Anacra. But it is doable. I think it's a lot more doable than anywhere else because the firmament wasn't designed to protect it.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is it's possible, but it's not likely. And I think a big thing is, even though the firmament wasn't meant to protect it, Dream is still of Anacra, and the firmament itself is meant to protect Anacra. And since we said it is of it and part of it, even though, like you said, it probably doesn't have that same, like we described, this weird energy mesh net that's guarded by the sentries of the Sentinels. It doesn't really have that necessarily going on for it. But aside from literally being effectively a celestial fence, the firmament also hides and kind of censors Anacra, which I think that would be the greatest protection that it would provide for it, is that it's kind of secluded.
Yes.
And only certain gaps will release anything. And it would take a lot for this floating, because you would need to have either an entity highly psychic or a disembodied entity floating through space that ends up randomly. And like you said, it's one of those things where you would have to randomly come across it. There's so much going on out there and there's so much space between, you wouldn't be able to target this and go, I want that. You would have to be in the area, catch a whiff of it, much like the Space Flea from Nowhere did, and seek to come there and figure out a way in without it being physical, which is, I mean, that's a lot of conditions. It's possible.
Yeah.
But huge amount of conditions.
I agree with you insofar as the firmament protects Dream, but it's like using the wrong tool for the job. And its primary protection is, like, the firmament is hard cover for the Four Kingdoms, and it's only concealment for the Fifth Kingdom. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Unless you had other points, my final point I wanted to bring up, which we only have a little bit of time for, is we spoke originally about how there were mortal races and mortal races dream. However, we were talking for a bit about how originally we had it planned to where only humans and things that were not humanoid, but human-like were able to dream. We originally didn't have it to where elves can dream. We originally didn't have it to where dwarves can dream. But I feel like we're in a weird place where we've kind of rescinded that, but we also haven't fully gone into that, because there was a really important warden that you were bringing up, but we didn't fully discuss, which I think we'll save for another episode.
Yeah,
which
he doesn't exist yet.
Okay, so you don't want to discuss that at all then. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna save that. What I will say is that there was a campaign we ran in Anacra, the first campaign that was ever run in Anacra, where it was established that only humans dreamed and everyone else, their brains did different things. And I think we're getting rid of that. But what I think we're going to do instead is that, like, when elves trance, they sort of relive their own memories, right? So I think it is that they just dream in a different way. Like, when they trance, they still enter the mindscape, they still enter the dream world, but their dreams are very different from human dreams, and they might inhabit a different region of dream. And dwarves probably in a similar way. Like, the dreams of dwarves might be more connected to the element because they're descended from the elements. So I think that there's like these different geographical regions, if you will, metaphorically geographic regions of dream. But most mortal creatures dream. I do not believe sovereigns dream. I do not believe sovereigns and elemental. I think sovereigns and elementals especially do not dream.
I completely agree with you, mate. The only thing I would make as an amendum, just looking at D&D rules is
Mhm.
I kind of feel like any creature that would trance would have that almost extra layer of protection, because they're really, as trancing, you're not fully just dreaming. Like you said, you're going through kind of the events of your life, considering you're a very long-lived creature usually, or a
Mhm.
very short-lived creature, depending on how you get your trance ability.
Let's put it this way, just not to cut you off, but let's put it this way. When creatures that normally sleep go to sleep, their minds extend into dream, but when you trance, you extend dream into your mind.
That pretty much makes sense, I think. Yeah. You're a little more insulated and protected.
Right, because you're starting a private server rather than connecting.
That's a good way of looking at it. That's a good gamer logic thing that we can wrap our brains around.
The Silent City absolutely gets its own episode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I know we're wrapping up right now. One of the ways we've been kind of doing things is and we're kind of getting to the point where we're going to have to change the way we do this. But we usually have been starting with a kingdom, as you would: dream, otherworld, overworld, etc. And from there, we'll pick usually 2 to 3 topics every other episode to go for, and we kind of try to blend them region to region. And we're getting to the point where we're now moving, after this, we're going to be slowly transitioning to the mortal realm, and from there we're going to be zooming in and just going land by land, area by area, ancestry by ancestry. We're going to be covering the Silent City. We're going to be covering a few more things that Joe has been really excited to dive into, but we are going to be moving away from the overall cosmology of Anacra, and we're going to be zooming in into the everyday life of the creatures that inhabit the mortal realm.
We'll be talking more about like the Northern Kingdoms, Sharon, Ioth, Tamrian, places like physical places you may have heard of, cultures you may have heard of that have appeared in our stories. So we're excited to get into that.
Yes, yes.
Any closing thoughts?
Dream is awesome. I love sleep, and we should spend more time there.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Always appreciate having you with us. We'll upload this to YouTube as soon as possible. Tune in next week for more Luncheon Lore, and we'll see you later.
Bye.